Thank you, Kara. Hello, everybody. I'm Tim Bartlett. I'm the Executive Director at the Urbana Park District. We're really excited to be here tonight with you all. Thank you all for coming. I think we have a good audience. Tonight, we wanted to share some of our updated concepts for the Prairie and Weaver Park complex. Just a little background. Again, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for participating. It's very important to us to get a lot of participation. Really, it provides critical input to the Park District on these plans, allows everyone to be part of our process, and it helps us build community. I did want to talk a little briefly about master planning, some of the benefits and the purposes. Obviously, the Park District's involved with master planning. I can honestly say in my 30 years of being at the district, I'm a landscape architect as well, we spend a lot of our time master planning. So parks like Crystal Lake Park and Meadowbrook have undergone many, many different plan reviews and updates over my 30 years. And we're getting ready to take on a new park, King Park, and update that plan. So this type of planning work is very typical to us. And it snaps sort of a picture in time, gives us some information, but over time, it allows for some flexibility. I did want to draw your attention to the first master plan that we did at Weaver Park. It was back in, I believe, about 2005. I'll give a little brief history about the park. But what I would ask you all to do is kind of keep this image in mind and compare it to the two concepts that you'll see in a little bit. Just a little bit about the early history of Weaver Park. The district would always be focused on master planning and looking at land acquisition for the future. I know at that time, the district was looking at a park on the east side of Urbana. And I think at that time, we were looking at maybe east of Route 130. But as we circled and started looking at locations, we identified this site. And when we approached the city of Urbana way back in the mid 1990s, I think they were trying to get some private development, I believe some apartments built on this site. The site consisted of two 30-acre tracts, and we waited that time out. We looped back with the city about a year or so later. That development didn't go forward, but they were trying to work on another housing development, so we backed off. After we learned that that process in the later 90s wasn't going to go forward, that's when the Park District really committed to looking at acquiring this park for the future. The tool that we used was working with the LawCon grant program. So we did write a grant, and we were able to acquire Weaver Park, which was later named Weaver Park after the acquisition. But that really provided this new 60-acre park for the east side of Urbana and was slated originally for an athletics complex. And we had already known about the nice woodland remnant of the big grove on the north side. So the idea was to kind of create this park where we had active recreation, active sports in a very natural setting. The wetland came along later as we learned about the site and that there was serious flooding that was really impacting the Scottswood neighborhood. So we worked with 6 units of government to develop the wetland basin. And the idea was to create that natural feature in a way to stop the flooding, protect Scottswood, and collect water from 3 major watersheds. And I think everyone would agree that's been a great success. I think we've won about 3 different engineering awards on that site. Again, looking at other new things, we know the Kickapoo Rail Trail was planned to come into Urbana on that east side. So we know we needed a park that included a trailhead facility, and that would be a home for events and activities related to trails. Now we move into planning for new growth. We've been very involved with a process to really tie both Prairie Park and Weaver Park together. After we committed to building our health and wellness facility at the Prairie site, we knew that both sites together would bring both active and passive recreational opportunities. I think tonight you'll see that we have some really exciting ideas. We've listened to a lot of the community, and we've tried to pull all the ideas forward so far. So we'd ask for everybody to really consider their thoughts and engage with us during the comment and question section. I would like to next introduce our planning team. I think that's the next slide, Kara. Did I skip that? Sorry, we've got myself, Tim Bartlett, Derek Lieber, Kara Dudek-Meisel, Corky Emerson, and Jeff Martin will be talking tonight. I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Hi, I'm Corky Emerson, Superintendent of Recreation. I have been here at the Park District for 23 and a half years. Have always been a part of the athletics recreational component for all those 23 years. My role tonight basically is kind of let you know that we're not going to go through the whole process to date, but just to let you know we've taken in all of our information. A lot of you have probably been involved with the stakeholder meetings. We had focus groups with both active and passive groups in our community, and just wanted to let you know, over time, I'm really excited about this project. I'm really excited about the active and the passive outlook of this park. You know, I have been working with soccer parents and skate park folks and, all the other active types of recreation people over the last 23 years. And I know with Brookins, we've always had a soccer field. We've always been able to participate and have a vital program for the community. We have about 320 kids to 350 kids every season. So that's fall and spring. And I know a lot of the folks over time have been like, well, when are you going to develop that master plan? Well, we haven't been able to do that. Now that we've built the health and wellness facility, we're really looking at that active space. We don't have any other active space in our community. We don't know of our future at Brookins. I would say all the comments that I heard over the years is, yeah, we have an open space, but this is not soccer space. This is open land that's wavy, kind of flows all over the place. And we really need, and I've seen some people in the discussion here tonight that, have always advocated that we need better space. And I'm really excited because I am very excited about not only the athletic space, I'm also very excited about the passive space and maintaining our natural areas. And I think we've come up with a really good plan. And I hope you all feel the same. So along with that, we also have a standpoint, from a professional standpoint, and our You Belong Here message. I'm really looking for our You Belong Here, and how do we include and make everything equitable in our district. And over the last 6 years, we've done a really good job of starting to reach our neighborhoods. And unfortunately, those people are not as vocal as a lot of other people. So as professionals, I think we need to take that stance and really provide that opportunity for them. And so that's really what I have to say today. You can see on the slide that there was a high demand for our athletics component. But again, I'm here advocating for all. And I think this is probably, in my 23 years, and we can probably go farther back than that, this is the opportunity to be able to offer that whole equitable component for the Park District. So that's what I had to say for tonight.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Jeff Martin. I actually have a face, but for some reason my camera is not cooperating tonight during the webinar. But I'm a landscape architect, an urban and community planner with Farnsworth Group. And myself and the rest of the team here is going to take you through the two concepts we've developed These have been whittled down from 4 concepts that we started out with, upwards of 6 months ago. Now we've got 2 concepts that we want to share with you. But before we get into those 2 concepts and then get into your comments and questions, I want to go through a little bit of the existing conditions, not only of the sites but kind of around the site, that are really starting to drive why we're doing what we're doing on these 2 concepts. So the first thing we wanted to point out, and Derek, if you want to start to maybe go through the animation. Most of you, probably all of you, have been out to the site. Main Street on the north, Washington Street on the south. Derek, if you want to hit the next one. Weaver Park, it's almost 60 acres. And then Prairie Park is 20 acres. So all total, we have almost 80 acres that we really have a responsibility, for generations to make an impact here of what do we do with this land. Corky kind of nailed it. There's an equity issue. Tim mentioned, active recreation, kind of in the natural setting. All those things need to come together for this to be a success. We all know around Brookins, there are some soccer fields there that we utilize. But again, long term, we want to be able to a little bit control our own destiny if we can have access to those fields around Brookins. Canaday, that's up off of Learman. That's a county-owned property for now. The Park District does have access to that for softball. Also, the elementary school, there's a softball field there. Again, for the time being, we should have access to that. When we start to look at some of the features in Weaver Park, if you've visited the site, you've gone in the parking lot, shown up there in the red. The next thing, that you really notice down there is that at the very south end, that area, when the Park District purchased the property, that was planted just in turf grass. And you can actually, if you look at the contours, you can see what almost looks like softball diamonds. Initially, the thought was, let's put the softball diamonds, down near the school. Kind of the big feature on the site is the wetland and the drainage swale that runs to the north. And it's not only the water, the wetland, but it's also kind of the area around it. There's some very sensitive bird habitat in these orange areas, and even beyond this, there's everything from rails, there's sparrows, there's bitterns. We want to make sure that we protect those and buffer those, but again, also try to weave in some of the active recreation that we're trying to accomplish. Some of the other natural features on the site, this kind of golden area, the Park District planted this area in more of a complex, prairie matrix in here. That would be a combination of native grasses, there's forbs. So that's a really good prairie matrix, high quality prairie in those areas. This area in brown, that's prairie also, but again, that was planted initially as a cover crop, as a tall grass cover crop in that area, versus going in and planting it in a turf grass. It would have to be mown all the time. The thought was, let's plant it in natives, so that's an area that we don't have to maintain until we decide what would happen with the property. And then the other neat feature on the site, is the woodland areas. There's the large grove up along Main Street, but there's also hedgerows that go down each side. Those are critical. Those provide some nice habitat for migrating birds, but also, and we'll get to it in a little bit when we talk about trailways, spaces for people to walk. And those woodlands, as you get down into Prairie Park, that becomes more park-like down there with more of a manicured lawn with overstory trees in there. Also in Prairie Park, what's kind of, Derek, if you want to hit the next one, is the health and wellness facility that's now under construction. So that's where the building is going to land, and then right next to it is going to be the parking lot. And you can see the parking lot occupies where 2 of the softball fields were. So part of the programming for the site plan is to how do we accommodate losing those 2 softball fields. If you want to, and then also another neat feature on the health and wellness plan is to create a wetland on that property. It's for rainwater management. That's planted with native species, and that's been designed not just to be a typical detention pond, but again, it's a wetland complex, different depths of water in there, and natural feature and amenities and plantings around it. So that kind of gives you an overall lay of not only the two parks, but kind of this whole block and the context of the entire block. We'll go to the next slide. This shows the health and wellness facility. Again, this is what's coming. The plan on the right, this is the master plan. And I worked with the Park District on this. This is back in 2019, 2020-ish. But you can see the health and wellness building. You can see the eventual full parking lot that will be built down there. As part of that, we had a lot of public input at the time. The desire for a splash pad, an outdoor playground, walking trails, bioswales in the parking lot, all that is in this master plan. And then those images on the left, that's from our architecture studio. That's showing just a perspective of the outside of the building, and then just an inside shot of the sports courts and the walking loop that you see around the top. So let's go through option one. And I think the best way to view this is I'm going to walk you from north to south kind of through the site. So we have two options. The first option locates the soccer at the north end of the site. Again, we had 4 plans ultimately that we had developed. 2 of them showed a road that connected from Washington Street to Main Street. And right away, no one really was keen on that. We don't want to have, excess pavement going through the site. So the idea of breaking it up, having a parking lot that comes in off of Main Street that would serve the soccer. Hey, Derek, I don't know if you have the ability on the pointer, if you can maybe want to point to some of the things, but there's a Kickapoo Rail Trail. Tim had mentioned that. There's a new trailhead that will happen right there, if everyone is seeing that. That'll have restroom facilities in that, and there'll be a large kind of grass lawn area next to it. So if there's events, if there's tents that need to be set up, that will happen right in that area. There was also a desire that we heard from the public and stakeholders for a small playground up in that area, and that's that feature right there. As we start to move south, we have 4 larger soccer fields. Those are about 180 feet by 330 feet in size, and then 2 smaller soccer fields that are about 140 feet by 225 feet. As we head south, then that's where we pick up the 2 softball diamonds right there. There is another restroom facility between those diamonds right in that area. And again, you see another parking lot right there that would serve not only the softball fields, but also give access to the natural areas that we want to make sure people can get access to. There's also in Weaver the opportunity for a multi-purpose field that would be right in that area. So that's kind of the programming on this. Again, it's a lot to take in at once. I think it's important to understand this is not all going to happen overnight. We have to, these things tend to get phased. So again, we're trying to show you the whole thing of here's what it could possibly be. But I think that the interesting thing is, if you look at the yellow box on the right-hand side, is the natural area on this. It's almost half the site, and that's roughly what I'm shown colored as the yellow area in there. It's about 29 acres. Again, it's about 49% of the site. As we move into into Prairie Park, some of the features we wanted to point out there, some of the things we heard from the public that were very important, the idea for pickleball courts. So we have a new parking lot coming in off of Art Bartel Road right there. We're showing 8 pickleball courts. That might happen in 2 phases. So we'd have a group of 4 that would happen, and then another group of 4. The other big thing we heard from the public was a skate park. So that would be that gray area right in there. And then also the other thing was sand volleyball. So you're starting to see about 4 or 5 sand volleyball courts right in there. The reason we located those there, people sled in the wintertime. So that would make a nice run out, over the sand volleyball in the wintertime, versus the skate park or the pickleball courts, which would have fencing around those. There's also it's kind of hard to see, but there's a half-court basketball right there that would have 3 hoops on it. They might be of different heights. There might be an 8-foot hoop and a couple of 10-foot hoops. The other thing we heard that was very important was to have full court basketball. So that's down closer to Washington Street, and it's a full court. Full court. It's 50 feet wide, but we're about 75 feet long. Part of that is to be able to tuck it into the trees down there. There's some nice mature trees in there, but again, to still give that full court experience to people. So those are the features, kind of the programming amenities that we're suggesting for this site. Derek, if you want to go to the next slide. One of the things that was important was to be able to, on the soccer fields, to be able to rotate these on an annual basis. So in one year, they might be oriented north-south. In the next year, we want to come in and rotate those just so the goal areas don't get killed out. They get a lot of traffic, and that just gives us a little bit of flexibility. The other thing we wanted to look at was to create some overflow parking. And there's 2 areas that we can do that. Again, we're trying to limit the amount of excessive pavement that we have. You know, these overflow areas could just be turf lawn. The one on the top is about 60 spaces, and the one on the bottom, I think, is about 85 spaces or so down there. But again, those are not paved. And again, we're trying to limit the amount of, impervious surface, that we have on the site. Speaking of that, Derek, if you want to hit the next slide. On this one, again, that wetland is critical, and the amount of buffer that we can get to that. On this one, roughly from the water's edge over to that that bathroom facility is roughly about 275 feet on this option. And again, with about half of the site, being more of the natural setting, that Tim talked about early on. Let's go to the next slide. And now I can kind of walk you through the trailway networks. And I've got these color coded because there's quite a network of trails here that link this site to the community at large. Derek, if you want to just kind of go through them one at a time. We have an existing multi-use path along Main Street. What's coming, in 2025, the Park District got an ITEP grant that's going to fund the construction of a trail that will literally take people to the front door of the health and wellness facility. So that'll run down Baker's Lane and connect up to the health and wellness facility. Our master plan then shows a connection that takes the trail up to Main Street. So what that does is that kind of creates a 1.5 miles. It could be a running loop, a walking loop, and it also provides a couple of access points to the neighborhood just to the east of our site, just east of Baker's Lane. We mentioned that Kickapoo Rail Trail, that trailhead, that facility that'll have restrooms in it, shelter, a small lawn area, have tents and events out there. Construction on that, probably 25 or 26. These yellow lines show concrete paths that would happen throughout the park. A lot of this is for maintenance to be able to get to the various diamonds, but it's also to kind of give people access kind of to the edges of that natural area. That, again, Corky talked about equity. We think it's important for people that may not normally get out into nature. Let's get them out there. Let's get them opportunities to be able to get out there. And a lot of times they're only going to do that if they have, some nice paths to walk on, to ride a bike on, to ride a skateboard on. The other paths we have, some of these are existing, but these are just more natural surface paths. Some of these are just earthen, some of them are, mulch, some of them are just mown through the prairie. But these are intended to be narrow, 3 foot wide. And again, some of these are existing, but again, to let people experience, kind of the neat natural features of the site. And then finally, how does this knit into the whole neighborhood? There's already a lot of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure around the neighborhood. And this really ties into that with our trail network. So that's option 1, kind of hitting you with a lot of stuff on that. I'll go through option 2 now because I want to be conscious of our time here and try to keep this to a half hour. On option 2, again, let's start at the north end of the site. On this one now, the difference between option 1 and 2, option 2 locates the softball fields to the north end. And one of the reasons we thought this might be interesting to do is the softball fields do need to be do need to be lit. And we're going to talk about dark sky lighting here in a minute, but this gets it further away from the wetland. And we talked about some of that sensitive bird habitat, something to consider about, which option, might be the better option. On this one, again, we have a parking lot that comes in that serves not only the Kickapoo Rail Trail trailhead, it also serves the softball diamonds, but then again, giving people access to be able to get out into that natural area. As we move south, again, 4 larger soccer fields that are served by a separate parking lot. That parking lot we kept really close to the property line of the school. So you can see we're trying to crowd the south and the west property lines with the more developed part of the site, and leaving that northeastern part of the site and the eastern part of the site, alone. 2 smaller soccer fields and another multi-purpose field between the soccer fields. And on this one, I won't go through everything in Prairie Park. It's virtually the same. It is the same as what was shown on the other option. If we want to hit the next slide. Again, on this one, to be able to to rotate those fields, it was very important. But on this one, we had to get a little bit more creative. Again, I'm trying to keep the footprint of the soccer as small as possible. So it causes us to have to make one of the larger soccer fields move over to the east. And then when we talk about the overflow parking, hit that, there we go. Again, we're not seeing this as pavement, but just seeing this as a turf grass. And there's different types of turf grass we can use. There's a fescue, it's very drought tolerant. It can take heavy traffic. That's kind of what I'm envisioning for those areas. And then at the bottom, you're seeing 2 yellow areas. Only one of those would be used at a time. If the fields are in their orange rotation, we'd be using the overflow parking that's on the east. If the fields are in their green orientation that's shown underneath, we'd be using the yellow parking, the long skinny one that's shown, on the left there. And on this one, the setback distance from the edge of the water roughly to the trail is about 140 feet on this option. But the total open space on this one, I skipped over this. Derek, if you could go back one slide, I want to make sure I get the number correct. I believe we're 53% on this one. So a little bit more open space on this one than option 1. So now we can maybe look at the trailways and just kind of go through those in a hurry, because those are virtually the same. And again, the whole idea of creating this loop that allows people to access the perimeter of the park, the Kickapoo Rail Trail, the interior trails that are concrete, the more natural trails that go through, and then the kind of the neighborhood trails that shows it in context. So those are the 2 options. Again, we had a lot of input from a wide variety of stakeholders. So I'm anxious to hear, your thoughts on this. But Derek, if you want to maybe talk a little bit, we talked about the softball field lighting and talk about the dark sky.
Yep. So one of the things we heard from folks, both the natural areas community that we work with, and our bird watching friends, was that there's concern about the effect of sport field lighting on the sensitive areas, particularly the wetland. And so we began doing some research. There's you all are probably familiar with the dark sky phenomenon. It's lighting that really limits lighting to where you absolutely need it, and limits any trespass or migration off of areas that are intended to be lit. There's currently a dark sky park at Middle Fork Forest Preserve District, and there's one single dark sky ball field in the state of Illinois that just got certified in the spring. We're looking forward to going up and visiting with those folks, learning more. We've talked with them about how it works. But what you're seeing here are 2 different renderings of the dark sky lighting. The top one is a ground view looking west, so looking towards the ball fields from essentially the trails along the periphery of the natural area. And then the bottom one is an aerial view looking east on the ball fields. And the dark sky lighting standards are very strict, and we would look to be certified, much like the ones in northern Illinois.
Just two more slides here. Many of you may be wondering what about some of the other amenities that were suggested on surveys or in focus groups and such. And it's not that those weren't considered, it's that those are perhaps being considered at Weaver, Prairie, or other areas of the Park District for those needs to be met. I won't go through each of them for you because these will be word for word on the survey that's going to go out with this presentation. And there you'll be able to prioritize what you think is important, least important, add further comments and such. As for next steps, this recording will be posted to the project webpage with the survey. It'll be open, it's on there now and it'll be open for 3 weeks. And what we hear will be used to create one final master plan draft. So that'll be the 3 rounds of input that we've had so far. And then there'll be an open house style meeting in the late fall where you can see what the final master plan is and then weigh in on some of the components of the vision book, which include budgeting, precedent photos, things like that. And then this is the project website, but we will also add that to the chat box later. And if you found the Zoom link, then this is the exact page where you got the Zoom link. I am going to stop the recording now.